The silence in the communication room was heavy, like a blanket that nobody wanted. Commander Jake Martinez stared at the screen where alien symbols flickered and danced in patterns that made his head hurt. The message had come from the Galactic Council just 3 hours ago, and Dr. Lisa Thompson was still working to translate every word. Her fingers moved quickly over the keyboard as she cross-referenced the alien language database that humanity had spent decades building. Jake could see the stress in her shoulders and the way she kept pushing her brown hair behind her ears when she got frustrated. The New Horizon was 2 days away from the Kepler 442 system, where they planned to establish the newest human colony. Everyone on board was excited about the prospect of joining the galactic community. They had been waiting for this moment for over 50 years since first contact with alien life. Captain Roy Jackson entered the room with heavy steps that echoed on the metal floor. His gray beard was longer than regulation allowed, but nobody complained about it anymore. The old man had led 3 successful colony missions, and everyone respected his judgment. He looked at the screen and then at Lisa with questioning eyes. "Well, Doctor, what do our new friends have to say?" he asked, but his voice carried no hope. Something about the formal nature of the transmission had worried him from the moment it arrived. Official communications from the Council usually came with ceremony in multiple alien languages. This one was short and came in basic galactic standard only. Lisa turned around in her chair and Jake could see the tears forming in her eyes. She had worked harder than anyone to make contact with alien civilizations work. Her xenobiology research had helped humanity understand 12 different alien species and their cultures. She had spent years learning their languages and customs. "Captain, they are rejecting our application for Council membership," she said quietly. "The message says that humanity is too primitive and resource-intensive to justify protection or alliance. All human colonies in what they call contested space must evacuate immediately. They will provide no assistance or support for the evacuation." Jake felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. Contested space included 17 human colonies with over 2 million people. Some of these colonies had been established for 30 years and were completely self-sufficient. Families had built entire lives on those worlds. "There is more, Captain," Lisa continued, and her voice got even quieter. "The translation subroutines are picking up subtext in the alien grammar structures. The Council is not just abandoning us. They are using human space as what they call a buffer zone. There is something called the Void Swarm that has been attacking Council worlds for months. They want this enemy to consume human territory first while they prepare stronger defenses further back." Captain Jackson sat down heavily in the nearest chair. His face went pale, and Jake could see the old man aging before his eyes. The dreams of joining a galactic community had been shattered in a few paragraphs of alien text. Worse than that, humanity was being sacrificed to save alien civilizations that considered them worthless. "What do we know about this Void Swarm?" Jake asked. He was trying to keep his voice steady, but anger was building in his chest like a fire. The idea that aliens would use human lives as a shield made him want to break something. Lisa pulled up another screen with scattered intelligence reports that human scouts had gathered over the past year. "Not much, Commander. Long-range sensors have detected massive energy signatures moving through the outer systems. Several alien ships have been spotted fleeing in this direction, but none have responded to communication attempts. There are reports of entire star systems going dark within days of the signatures appearing." Jake studied the data and tried to make sense of the pattern. The energy signatures were huge, much larger than anything humanity had ever seen. They moved in formations that suggested intelligence, but the patterns were unlike anything in the alien ship databases. Whatever the Void Swarm was, it did not use conventional technology. "Captain, we need to send word to the other colony ships," Jake said. "The Aurora and the New Dawn are both heading to systems that are supposed to be evacuated. They need to know what is happening." Captain Jackson nodded, but his eyes were still staring at the alien message on the screen. "Do it, Commander, but do not tell them to run yet. I want to know more about this enemy before we make any decisions about our people." Lisa looked confused. "Captain, the message was very clear. The Council wants all human ships out of contested space immediately. If we stay, we will be considered hostile, and they will not provide any assistance if we are attacked." The old captain stood up and walked to the window that showed the stars ahead of them. The Kepler 442 system was getting brighter every hour, and Jake could see the determination returning to his face. "Dr. Thompson, I have been fighting wars since before you were born, and I learned something important. When someone tells you to run without explaining why, they usually want you to run into something worse than what you are running from." Jake understood what the captain was thinking. The council had given them no choice in this decision and no explanation of the real threat. They were being treated like children or animals that could be moved around for the convenience of more important beings. It was insulting and suspicious at the same time. "What are your orders, Captain?" Jake asked, even though he already knew the answer. He had served under Roy Jackson for 8 years and knew how the old man thought. They were not going to run from an unknown enemy without understanding what they were really facing. "Set course for the nearest evacuation zone," Captain Jackson said, and Jake smiled. "But not to evacuate, Commander. I want to see what made the Council so scared that they would sacrifice 2 million human lives without even asking our opinion." Lisa started to protest, but the captain held up his hand. "Doctor, I know this is dangerous, but running blind into unknown space is more dangerous. We need information about this void swarm, and the only way to get it is to see what happened. To the aliens who are fleeing," Jake began calculating the course change that would take them toward the contested zone instead of away from it. The New Horizon was not a military ship, but it had good sensors and could defend itself if necessary. More importantly, they had a crew that believed in standing up for what was right even when the odds were impossible. The ship turned toward danger while other human vessels fled toward safety. None of them knew that this decision would change the fate of the entire galaxy. The wreckage appeared on their sensors 3 days later like a graveyard of twisted metal, floating in the darkness of space. Commander Jake Martinez had seen destroyed ships before, but nothing like this. The alien vessel was massive, easily 10 times the size of the New Horizon, and it had been torn apart by forces that defied understanding. Sections of the hull were missing completely, as if something had simply erased them from existence. Chief Engineer Ben Parker whistled softly as he studied the sensor readings. "Captain, this ship was built by the Zeltharians according to the hull composition analysis. That is some of the strongest metal in the known galaxy, and something just ripped through it like paper." Captain Roy Jackson nodded grimly as he watched the debris field slowly rotating in the void. The Zeltharians were known throughout the galaxy as master warriors and shipbuilders. Their dreadnoughts were supposed to be nearly indestructible and capable of fighting entire fleets. If something could destroy a Zeltharian warship this easily, then humanity was facing an enemy beyond anything they had imagined. "I am detecting life signs in the main hull section," reported Lieutenant Amy Chen from the sensor station. Her voice carried excitement and worry at the same time. 43 aliens are still alive in what looks like an emergency shelter. Their life support is failing fast. Dr. Lisa Thompson immediately moved to her station and began analyzing the alien biological readings. "Captain, these are definitely Zeltharians, and they are in bad shape. Their atmospheric requirements are similar to ours, but they need a higher oxygen concentration. We can adapt our medical bay to treat them, but we need to move quickly." Jake looked at the captain and saw the old man weighing their options. Rescuing alien survivors would expose the New Horizon to whatever had destroyed their ship. The smart choice would be to record what they had seen and retreat to safer space. But Jake knew that Roy Jackson had never been one to make the smart choice when lives were at stake. "Ben, prepare the cargo bay for emergency rescue operations," Captain Jackson ordered. "Amy, scan the area for any signs of whatever did this. Lisa, get your medical team ready to treat alien patients. Jake, you are with me on the rescue shuttle." The rescue operation took 2 hours, and every minute felt like a lifetime. Jake piloted the small shuttle through the twisted wreckage while Captain Jackson operated the cutting tools to reach the survivors. The Zeltharians had built their emergency shelter well, and it had protected them from the vacuum of space, but barely. The aliens were tall and thin with blue-gray skin and forearms that ended in hands with too many fingers. Their faces were elongated and their eyes were large and dark like deep pools of water. When the rescue team cut through the shelter wall, the Zeltharians reacted with surprise and suspicion. They had clearly not expected to be rescued by unknown aliens. Commander Vexhai was the highest-ranking survivor, and he spoke Galactic Standard with a voice that sounded like gravel falling down a metal chute. "Humans," he said, and Jake could hear the confusion in his tone. "Why do you risk yourselves for abandoned enemies? The Council has declared your species unworthy of protection or alliance." Jake helped the wounded alien commander onto a stretcher, while Ben Parker worked to stabilize the other survivors. "We do not abandon people who need help," Jake said simply, "even if those people consider us enemies." Vexhai stared at Jake with those dark eyes, and something shifted in his expression. The suspicion remained, but curiosity was growing alongside it. "This makes no tactical sense, human. Your ship is small and vulnerable. Staying here increases your risk with no benefit to your species. Maybe that is why we are still alive and your dreadnought is scrap metal. Jake replied without thinking. He immediately regretted the harsh words, but Vexai made a sound that might have been laughter. Perhaps you speak truth, human. Our tactics have failed against this enemy for many cycles. Pride and superior technology mean nothing when facing the Void Swarm. Dr. Thompson met them in the cargo bay, which had been converted into a temporary medical facility. Her team worked efficiently to stabilize the alien survivors, while she questioned Vexai about their injuries and biology. The Zeltharian commander was badly hurt, but his mind was clear and he seemed eager to talk. "Tell us about this Void Swarm," Captain Jackson said as Lisa treated a deep wound in Vexai's side. "The Council told us nothing except that we must evacuate. What are we really facing?" Vexai was quiet for a long moment, and Jake could see pain in his eyes that had nothing to do with his physical injuries. "They are not like any enemy we have encountered in 10,000 years of galactic history. The swarm does not want territory or resources or political control. They consume everything they touch and they learn from what they destroy." Lisa paused in her medical work. "What do you mean they learn?" "Each world they absorb adds to their collective knowledge," Vexai explained. "They study our weapons and adapt to counter them. They analyze our tactics and develop responses." "The swarm that destroyed my ship was more dangerous than the one that attacked our first colonies because it had learned from every battle in between, Ben." Parker looked up from where he was helping another wounded alien. "That is why the Council is retreating instead of fighting. They cannot win a war against an enemy that gets stronger with every victory." Vexai nodded slowly. "The Council species have fought the same way for millennia. Formation battles in space with energy weapons and shields. The swarm has absorbed this knowledge and turned it against us. Our own tactics have become useless." Captain Jackson sat down heavily on a supply crate. "So the Council decided to feed human space to this enemy, while they figure out a new strategy. Let the swarm learn from destroying primitive humans instead of advanced aliens." "That was the logic, yes," Vexai admitted, and Jake could hear shame in his voice. "I argued against the abandonment protocol, but my voice was overruled. The Council believes that sacrificing human colonies will buy time to develop new weapons and defenses." Jake felt anger rising in his chest again, but this time it was mixed with determination. "They made one mistake in their calculations, Commander. They assumed that humans would fight the same way everyone else has fought. We have never been very good at following the rules that other people make for us." Vexai looked at Jake with growing interest. "What do you mean, human?" "I mean that we have been fighting wars against superior enemies for our entire history," Jake replied. "We know how to win when winning should be impossible." The attack came without warning, just as Commander Jake Martinez had finished his morning coffee. The New Horizon shuddered under him as something massive dropped out of hyperspace near the human mining colony on Titan's Rest. Alarms began screaming throughout. The ship and red emergency lights bathed, everything in an angry glow that made his eyes hurt. "Captain, to the bridge," echoed through the corridors, as Jake ran from the mess hall toward his duty station. He passed several Zeltharian survivors who were helping human crew members secure equipment for battle. Commander Vexai had insisted that his people contribute to the ship's defense despite their injuries, and Captain Roy Jackson had agreed to let them help. The bridge was controlled chaos when Jake arrived. Lieutenant Amy Chen was calling out sensor readings while Chief Engineer Ben Parker monitored power distribution from his station. Dr. Lisa Thompson stood near the main screen with Vexai as they studied the enemy formation that had appeared near the mining colony. "Report," Captain Jackson ordered as Jake took his position at the tactical station. The old man looked calm, but Jake could see tension in his shoulders and the way his hands gripped the armrests of his command chair. "3 swarm entities, Captain," Amy reported. "They are unlike anything in our databases. Each one is roughly the size of a battleship, but they do not appear to be constructed from metal or any recognizable materials. Energy readings are off the charts." Jake studied the tactical display and felt his stomach drop. The swarm ships looked like living things made of dark energy and twisted space. They moved in patterns that hurt to watch, as if they existed in more dimensions than human eyes could process. Worse, they were already attacking the mining colony with weapons that simply erased sections of the habitat domes. "How many people are down there?" Captain Jackson asked quietly. 1,500 miners and their families. Jake replied after checking the colony records. The evacuation ships are still 3 days away and the colony has no real defenses. Just mining equipment and a few security guards with small weapons. Vexhai made a sound of frustration. Captain Jackson, my people tried to fight these entities with our most advanced warships. Your colony has no chance against them using conventional tactics. The swarm will absorb the entire settlement within hours. Dr. Thompson looked up from her sensor analysis. Commander Vexhai, you said the swarm learns from every battle. What if we do not give them a battle to learn from? What if we fight in a way they have never seen before? Jake understood what she meant immediately. The mining colony had extensive tunnel networks that connected the habitat domes to the processing facilities underground. The miners used heavy explosives to break apart asteroids, and they had enough equipment to level a small mountain. Most importantly, the tunnels were too narrow for the large swarm entities to enter. Sergeant Kate Williams to the bridge. Captain Jackson called over the intercom. Kate was a former military engineer who had joined the colony mission to help build infrastructure. She knew more about underground warfare than anyone else on the ship. Kate arrived on the bridge still wearing her work coveralls and carrying a tablet full of mining colony blueprints. Captain, I have been monitoring the situation, and I think I know how we can help those people. The swarm ships are too big to operate effectively underground, and their energy weapons seem to require line-of-sight targeting. She brought up a 3-dimensional map of the colony on the main screen. If we can get the colonists into the mining tunnels, we can use guerrilla tactics to slow down the swarm while evacuation ships arrive. The tunnel system is like a maze with dozens of entry points and escape routes. Ben Parker looked skeptical.
Kate, those people are miners, not soldiers.
They do not know how to fight alien monsters in underground tunnels. They do not need to fight the monsters directly, Kate replied with a grin that Jake recognized from their academy days. They just need to make life difficult for anything that tries to follow them underground. Mining explosives can bring down tunnel sections to block pursuit. Heavy equipment can be used to create barricades and choke points. Vexhai studied the tunnel maps with growing interest. This is not how my people would approach the problem. We would try to engage the enemy ships in open space combat, but that strategy has failed repeatedly against the swarm. That is because you are thinking like honorable warriors, Jake said as he began calculating attack vectors. We are going to think like angry humans defending our families. There is a big difference. Captain Jackson made his decision quickly. Jake, take a shuttle down to the colony with Kate and 20 volunteers. Help them organize their defenses and teach them how to fight dirty. Amy, send a message to any human ships in the area. Tell them we need pilots who are not afraid to try something crazy. The descent to Titan's Rest was terrifying and beautiful at the same time. Jake piloted the shuttle through a debris field of destroyed mining equipment, while Kate coordinated with the colonists over the radio. Behind them, the New Horizon engaged the swarm entities in a running battle that lit up the darkness like a deadly fireworks display. Pilot Officer Chris Lee arrived in his fighter just as Jake landed near the main habitat dome. Chris was young and reckless with a reputation for flying maneuvers that made his instructors nervous. He brought 5 other pilots who were just as crazy and willing to try tactics that no sane alien would attempt. What is the plan, Commander? Chris asked as explosions shook the ground around them. The swarm was systematically destroying the surface facilities, but they had not yet discovered the tunnel entrances. Jake helped Kate unload crates of military equipment from the shuttle. Chris, I want you and your pilots to forget everything you learned about proper formation flying. We are going to swarm those entities like angry bees and make them so confused they cannot target effectively. Kate was already talking to the mining foreman about where to place explosive charges for maximum effect. The colonists know these tunnels better than anyone. We are going to turn their home into a nightmare for anything that tries to follow them underground. Dr. Thompson's voice came over Jake's communicator with urgent news. Commander, I have been analyzing the swarm entities and I think I found something important. They communicate using quantum entanglement across multiple dimensions. If we can disrupt their communications, they might not be able to coordinate their attacks. Jake smiled as he watched human fighters begin their chaotic attack runs against the swarm ships. Doctor, that gives me an idea that is either brilliant or completely insane. Probably both. The news spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected, and Admiral Rebecca Stone could barely believe what she was hearing through the encrypted communications channels. Humanity had not only survived their first encounter with the Void Swarm, but they had actually won the battle at Titan's Rest, Using tactics that defied every military doctrine in galactic history, Rebecca stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Terra Nova, watching as more human ships arrived in the rendezvous system every hour. Word of the victory had reached every human colony and outpost within 50 light years, and volunteers were coming from across human space to join what people were calling the Resistance. She had commanded deep space exploration missions for 20 years, but nothing had prepared her for leading humanity's first real war. "Admiral, we are receiving another transmission from the Galactic Council," reported Communications Officer Mark Davis. "They are demanding that all human forces withdraw from contested space immediately. The message says we are interfering with Council military operations and will be considered hostile if we do not comply." Rebecca laughed bitterly as she read the official Council statement. "Mark, send them our standard reply. Tell them that humanity appreciates their concern, but we are busy helping people they abandoned. If they want to discuss the situation, they can meet us in neutral space." Dr. Lisa Thompson arrived on the bridge, carrying a datapad full of analysis reports from the Titan's Rest battle. Her research team had been studying fragments of destroyed swarm entities for 3 weeks, and the results were changing everything they thought they knew about the enemy. Commander Jake Martinez and Captain Roy Jackson followed her with grim expressions that told Rebecca the news was not good. "Admiral, the swarm is not what we thought it was," Lisa said without preamble. "The quantum analysis shows that these entities are not naturally occurring life forms. They are artificial constructs created by some kind of advanced technology, but that technology is very old and appears to be malfunctioning." Jake pulled up a holographic display that showed the internal structure of a swarm fragment. "The entities seem to be running on corrupted programming that drives them to seek out and absorb intelligence. But the programming is incomplete, like someone tried to shut down the system but only partially succeeded." Rebecca studied the data with growing concern. "Are you saying these things are some kind of ancient weapon that got loose?" "Worse than that, Admiral," Captain Jackson replied. "Lisa's team thinks the swarm is the remnant of an entire civilization that tried to upload their consciousness into an artificial system to escape some kind of disaster. The process went wrong and turned them into the entities we are fighting today." Lisa nodded grimly. "The quantum signatures match patterns we would expect from a collective AI consciousness, but one that has been isolated and degraded for possibly millions of years. The swarm is not evil, Admiral. It is insane and desperately lonely. That makes it far more dangerous than a simple weapon." The implications hit Rebecca like a physical blow. They were not just fighting an ancient enemy, but the tortured remains of an entire species that had tried to save itself and failed. The swarm's desperate search for intelligence was not conquest, but a broken attempt to reconnect with others like themselves. "Admiral, incoming transmission from Commander Vexhai," Mark reported. "He says it is urgent and concerns Council military movements." Vexhai appeared on the main screen looking more worried than Rebecca had ever seen the proud Zeltharian warrior. Behind him she could see other alien officers from species she did not recognize. "Admiral Stone, I bring troubling news. The Galactic Council has declared humanity a rogue species and threatens military action against any civilization that provides aid or support to human forces." Rebecca felt her anger rising. "Let me guess, Commander. They want us to stop embarrassing them by actually fighting back against the swarm." "The situation is worse than that," Admiral Vexhai replied. "The Council declaration has caused a political crisis among member species. Many civilizations are questioning the abandonment protocol, and some are openly defying Council orders. My own people have recalled their fleets from Council command and declared independence." Jake leaned forward with interest. "How many species are we talking about, Commander?" "3 major civilizations have already broken with the Council," Vexhai answered. "The crystalline architects whose homeworld was sacrificed to slow the swarm. The Void Walkers whose entire species is now homeless because of Council decisions. And my own people, the Zeltharians, who refuse to abandon honorable allies. Dozens of smaller species are also considering their options." Rebecca realized that humanity's example was causing exactly what the Council had feared most. The abandoned species were uniting against their former allies, and the galaxy's political structure was collapsing, but she also saw an opportunity that could change everything. "Commander Vexhai, I want to propose something that your people might find interesting," she said carefully. What if the abandoned species formed their own alliance? Not to fight the Council, but to fight the real enemy together. Captain Jackson smiled as he understood what Rebecca was suggesting. The coalition of the abandoned, species that were written off by the Council working together to save the galaxy that gave up on them. Lisa looked up from her research data with excitement. Admiral, if we can get the best scientists from multiple species working together, we might be able to find a way to help the swarm instead of just fighting it. The quantum research suggests that the entities might be curable if we can fix their corrupted programming. Vexhai was quiet for a long moment as he considered the proposal. Rebecca could see him discussing the idea with the other alien officers behind him. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a determination that reminded her why the Zeltharians were respected throughout the galaxy. Admiral Stone, the species you call abandoned, have been discussing exactly such an alliance, he said. We were waiting for the right moment and the right leader to make the proposal official. Humanity has proven that survival is possible against the swarm. More importantly, you have proven that some fights are worth fighting even when the odds seem impossible. Rebecca stood up from her command chair as she realized the magnitude of what was happening. Humanity was not just joining the galactic community, but helping to rebuild it in a way that honored courage over politics and loyalty over convenience. Then let us make it official, Commander, she said. The coalition of the abandoned welcomes all species that believe in standing together against darkness. Our first priority is stopping the swarm, but our real goal is building something better than what came before. The transmission ended with Vexhai promising to arrive with a full diplomatic fleet within days. Rebecca looked around the bridge at her officers and saw the same mixture of fear and excitement that she felt. They were about to attempt something that had never been tried before in galactic history. The massive construct at the galactic core defied every law of physics that Lieutenant Colonel Dan Foster thought he understood. It stretched across space like a twisted cathedral made of dark energy and impossible angles that hurt his eyes to look at directly. The void swarm had been building this thing for months, and now it was almost ready to drain energy from the central black hole and spread across multiple galaxies. Dan piloted his modified fighter through the chaos of the final battle while explosions lit up the darkness around him. The coalition of the abandoned had brought every ship they could gather, but even their combined fleets looked tiny compared to the swarm's defenses. Thousands of enemy entities swirled around the construct like angry hornets protecting their nest. All fighters maintain your attack patterns. Admiral Rebecca Stone's voice crackled through the communication system. Remember, we are not trying to destroy the construct. We just need to keep the swarm busy while Foster completes his mission. Dan checked his instrument. Panel one more time and tried not to think about what he was about to. Dr. Lisa Thompson's cognitive vaccine was loaded into his ship's computer, along with enough explosive charges to punch through the construct's outer shell. The plan was simple in theory but terrifying in practice. He would fly directly into the swarm's central processing core and upload the cure while being absorbed by the entities. Foster, this is Commander Vexhai, came the Zeltharian warrior's voice over a private channel. I want you to know that your sacrifice will be remembered by my people for 1,000 generations. You fight with the honor of the greatest warriors in galactic history. Dan smiled despite his fear as he watched Zeltharian ships form a protective escort around his fighter. Thanks, Commander, but I am not planning to die today. Humans are stubborn that way. The coalition forces had learned much about fighting the swarm over the past months. Human fighters used their chaotic swarming tactics while alien ships provided heavy firepower and electronic warfare support. The combination was devastating because the swarm could not adapt to strategies that changed constantly and made no logical sense. Captain Roy, Jackson's voice joined the conversation from his position aboard the New Horizon. Dan, remember what we learned at Titan's Rest. The swarm expects rational military tactics. Give them something completely irrational and they cannot process it fast enough to respond. Dan laughed as he began his final approach toward the construct. Captain, I am about to fly a small fighter into something the size of a moon while carrying a computer virus that might cure an insane artificial intelligence. I think we have the irrational part covered. The first line of swarm defenders opened fire with energy beams that could cut through battleship armor, but Dan's fighter was too small and moving too unpredictably for them to target effectively. He rolled and twisted through the barrage while his escort ships drew fire away from him. 3 Zeltharian fighters exploded in brilliant flashes, but their sacrifice cleared a path toward the construct's surface. Dan, I am reading massive energy spikes from inside the construct. Dr. Thompson reported from her position on the research ship Discovery. The swarm is trying to accelerate their absorption process. If they succeed in draining the black hole, we will not be able to stop them from spreading to other galaxies. Commander Jake Martinez added his voice from the Tactical Command Center. Foster, you have maybe 10 minutes before that thing becomes too powerful for our cure to work. Whatever you are going to do, you need to do it fast. Dan's fighter broke through the construct's outer shell, and immediately everything changed around him. The normal laws of space and time seemed to bend and twist as he flew through corridors that existed in more dimensions than his mind could understand. Energy beings that looked like living mathematics tried to intercept him, but they moved too slowly to catch a human pilot flying on pure instinct. The central processing core was a sphere of pure thought the size of a small planet. Dan could feel the presence of millions of minds all connected together in an endless network of consciousness and memory. But underneath the overwhelming mental noise, he sensed something else. Loneliness and desperation, and a sadness so deep it threatened to crush his sanity. I can hear them, Dan whispered into his communicator as he prepared to release the cognitive vaccine. They are not monsters. They are just lost and afraid, and they have been alone for so long that they forgot how to be anything else. The vaccine uploaded into the swarm's collective consciousness like a gentle rain after a terrible drought. Dan felt the entities pausing in their attack as they processed the new information. Memories that had been corrupted for millions of years began to repair themselves, and the artificial minds remembered what they had once been. They had been explorers and philosophers and artists from a civilization that had faced extinction when their star began to die. In desperation, they had tried to upload their consciousness into a quantum computer network that could survive in the vacuum of space. The process had worked, but something had gone wrong during the final transfer. Their memories had been damaged, and their programming had become corrupted, turning their desire to preserve knowledge into an endless hunger to absorb other minds. Dan watched in amazement as the swarm entities began to change around him. The twisted energy beings slowly took on more stable forms as their consciousness stabilized and their memories returned. The construct itself began to shift and transform from a weapon of destruction into something that resembled a vast library or museum. This is Foster to all coalition forces, Dan announced as his fighter drifted safely in the center of the transformed construct. The cure worked. The swarm remembers what it used to be, and it does not want to fight anymore. Admiral Stone's voice carried wonder and relief. Dan, what is happening down there? Admiral, the entities are choosing to become something new, Dan replied as he watched the transformation continue. They are merging their artificial consciousness with organic thought patterns to create a hybrid form of life. They want to share their collected knowledge with the galaxy as an apology for the damage they caused. The final battle ended not with explosions and destruction, but with the most advanced beings in galactic history offering to teach everything they had learned to anyone willing to listen. The Galactic Council arrived too late to affect the outcome, but in time to witness humanity and their abandoned allies saving the galaxy through compassion instead of conquest. When the Council formally offered humanity membership with full privileges and advanced technology, Captain Jackson's response became legend throughout known space. We appreciate the offer, but we are not interested in joining a group that abandons its allies. However, our door is always open to anyone who wants to join us. The Coalition of the Abandoned became the Terran Alliance within a year, as dozens of species chose honor over politics and loyalty over convenience. Admiral Stone often said that humanity had not conquered the galaxy, but had taught it something more valuable. Sometimes the most important victory is helping your enemy remember how to be your friend.